And let us open ourselves to the presence of the living God within, around, among us, everywhere. We will now hear this morning's call to worship read by Mirtha.
Good morning. Today's invocation is inspired by Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. Call all the laborers, O God. Call your laborers who woke early. Call your laborers who came late. Call your laborers who feel wronged. Call your laborers who feel overlooked. Call your laborers who have no employment. Call your laborers who can't feed their children with this wage. Call your laborers who are essential workers during a pandemic. Call your laborers who are incarcerated, fighting raging fires. Call your laborers who know they are working in your fields. Call your laborers who use their wage to increase your love. Call all your laborers, O God. Tell us to roll up our sleeves, for we know that we have work to do. Let us find you in the work we share here and now. In Christ's presence, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Before we do anything else, there's somebody that, Becky muted everyone. Thank you. The reason we're here is we're here to learn to love. We're here to learn about true peace, which is justice for all people, not just some. We're here to remember who we all are. Each and every one of us on this planet is God's beloved. So today, whoever you are, wherever you're on in your life journey, wherever you're from, we're students learning about love, courageous love, compassion and justice-seeking love for all people. Welcome if you're here for the first time, or if you have a special prayer request or concern just for the pastor, you can put it into the welcome form that's in your bulletin that should be in the chat. This Sunday is Just Peace Sunday, and our denomination, the UCC, is a justice-doing, peace-seeking church, reconciling the truth that there is no peace without justice for all people. All forms of physical and economic injustice and violence, especially against people of color, we are called to transform. And so we're reminded that we are embodied beings. Stretch if you'd like, do a neck roll, whatever makes you comfortable. Sun salutation to the dawn if you want to stand up. And as you are taking a deep breath, aware of the healthy air quality today that we will never take for granted. And so now, in honor of Just Peace Sunday, how many of you are involved with yoga classes? Just raise your hand. Let me see your hands. There's a tradition of saying namaste, which in Sanskrit means the God in me, the spirit in me honors, bows before the God within you. And so let us take a moment to bow to the presence of the holy within each one of us. And we will now, a little bit of context for our opening hymn this morning. I want to dedicate this Morning Has Broken, which reminds me so much of Genesis, which is really what Rosh Hashanah is all about, the beginning of the new year. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on the eve of Rosh Hashanah during sunset. And let us open ourselves to this morning, this day, where her magnificent energy and life and the spirit that so inspired her inspires us. We will now hear A Morning Has Broken, Katie Givler.
fresh from the Word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the Word. Praise for them springing fresh from the Word.
Amen. Thank you. Morning has broken. And now we will hear the prayer of confession, and Philippia Pegram will be joining me. We are all born into cultural currents that reward some
and penalizes others merely for the color of their skin.
Some of us benefit from generations of accumulated wealth. Others of us stagger under the burden of generations of racial oppression, discrimination, and bias. Where I've felt welcome,
I felt shut out.
where I was invited to join,
I was told I didn't belong.
where others have been willing to invest in me,
My gifts have been consistently undervalued.
where I've been asked to share my thoughts,
I've been told to keep quiet.
where I've found opportunity.
I've run into barricades.
For over 200 years, this country has struggled to live up to the aspirational equality written into our founding documents.
For over 2,000 years, the church has struggled to live into the promise of the gospel's beloved community.
And let us bow our heads for a moment in prayer. God of justice, awaken us to the dawn of this new day. Forgive us our complicity and collusion with systemic racial injustice. Stir up your spirit within us Restore us in the work of reconciliation by pulling up the thorns of white supremacy and sowing seeds of economic justice. God of all people, remind us that our worth is not determined by how the world judges us or how the economy values us. Our worth is neither increased nor diminished by our deeds, our impairments, our productivity, or our failures. Our worth is determined by God, who loves each and every one of us as beloved children. Amen. And we will now hear the music for preparation. Gabrielle.
Yes, and a few words. So this is a song that recently was written by like friends of Skyline, the singer and the songwriter. So we may remember that they came and visited us a Valentine's Day weekend. So they're good friends of mine. And they wrote this song. It's a collection. They write that it's a collection of vignettes based on people and places that they encountered in October of last year during. They were the High Plains Public Radio Music Ambassadors. So they did a tour of Kansas and Texas. And so these are kind of little snippets. And a lot of their music is about money and work and the kind of economic system of this country and how it benefits some people more than others. So I'm going to take a pass at it and we'll just see. And I'm only going to do some verses, but if you want to hear the whole thing, I included a link in the bulletin and you can go look at that later. Okay. Out here the wild mares run free without a care. These rough and rugged stones keep the hoofs from overgrowing. The state keeps us around to keep the population down. But if a stallion gets his way, ain't none of us are getting paid. Out here we got different troubles on our minds. Different problems on our hands you would not understand. Troubles of a different kind. I'm sorry that I'm late and I missed watching you play, but it was steak night at the town hall meeting. Been a while since I had eaten, no gristle on the meat. Can you believe that it was free? I've been scraping by, but no can of beans for me tonight. Out here, got different troubles on my mind, different problems on my hands you would not understand, troubles of a different kind. You know that all us farmers are nothing more than gamblers. Season's dirt under my nails, weigh my hopes upon the scales. If an earthly snowfall hits the corn, it'll wipe the harvest out. You say the earth is grown warm, I say God will sort it out. Out here, got different troubles on our minds, different troubles on our hands you would not understand, troubles of a different kind. Out here, got different troubles on our minds, different problems on our hands you would not understand, troubles of a different kind, yes, troubles of a different kind.
Amen. Thank you. I think the singer and the songwriter would be really honored. Thank you, Gabrielle. We have several readings this morning. We have 2 quotes, and then later in the sermon, a paraphrased gospel reading. And the first quote is from James Baldwin, and the context was February 1965, the year of the US Voting Rights Act. And it was a debate between William F. Buckley and James Baldwin at the University of Cambridge. And the motion of the debate that the American dream was at the expense of Black Americans. And the brilliant Black civil rights activist Author James Baldwin responded, "The American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. I picked the cotton and I carried it to the market and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing, for nothing." And our second quote comes from Nobel Prize economist Joseph Stiglitz from his 2012 book, The Price of Inequality: How Today's Divided Society Endangers Our Future. And he writes, "There are two visions of America a half a century from now. One is of a society more divided between the haves and the have-nots, a country in which the rich live in gated communities, send their children to expensive private schools, and have access to first-rate private medical care. Meanwhile, the rest live in a world marked by insecurity, at best mediocre education, and in effect, rationed healthcare. They hope and pray they don't get seriously sick. At the bottom are millions of young people alienated without hope." I have seen that picture in many developing countries. Economists have given it a name, a dual economy. Two societies living side by side, but hardly knowing each other, hardly imagining what life is like for the other. Whether we will fall to the depths of some countries where the gates grow higher and the societies split farther and farther apart, I do not know. It is, however, a nightmare toward which we are slowly marching. And our third reading from Matthew's Gospel is printed in your bulletins, and I will be preaching on this gospel, and it's paraphrased later. So please pray with me. Come, Holy Spirit, fill our hearts, kindle us in the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit that we may be renewed, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Amen. Thinking about what's on everyone's mind this week. This weekend on Friday evening, the eve of Rosh Hashanah, where Jews from all over the world celebrate God's creation of the world, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg took her last breath. And even in the end, her last wishes were for justice, especially for those most marginalized. Very aware of her own mortality, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the following words about how she would like to be remembered, and I quote, "I would like to be remembered as someone who used whatever talent she had to do her work to the very best of her ability, and to help repair tears in her society, to make things a little better through the use of whatever ability she has. To do something, as my colleague David Soder would say, outside myself, because I've gotten much more satisfaction for the things that I've done for which I was not paid." Days before she died, Ruth told her granddaughter Clara, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. And I pray for this as well, given the magnitude of this decision upon our system of justice." Now, according to some, things are quite just. In fact, the system is working perfectly. Things couldn't be better. We're the world's wealthiest nation. In fact, we are the richest society in human history. The economy's strong. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is approaching record highs. We're making America great again. And yet, nearly half the population in our country lives in poverty or is struggling to make ends meet, especially people of color. Systemic racism is being exposed not only through the repeated examples of physical violence against Black lives, as witnessed in the shootings of Jacob Blake, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others, but also through the generational economic violence that has come sharply into focus this year. The economic violence of slavery, white supremacy, and racism has had a generational impact on Black communities and has created the racial wealth gap we see today, a gap in which the net worth of white households is about 10 times that of Black households. And Jesus wept at the spiritual poverty of the empire. And that was before COVID. The ugly truth about who we are is now being fully revealed, and it is apocalyptic. With the COVID pandemic, here in this country, we are 5% of the global population with 20% of its mortality rate. That's close to 200,000 people. That's almost 4 Vietnam Wars, the deaths of 4 Vietnam Wars of US soldiers. It's over 60 9/11 events, and it is disproportionately poor people of color, with Blacks dying at twice the rate of whites and Hispanics at 50% over the rate of death of white people. But we are not only suffering from the disease of COVID. That's the most recent manifestation. For centuries, we have been suffering from 4 diseases that are all interconnected, which now threaten our country's social and moral health: racism, poverty, environmental devastation, and the war economy, sanctified by the heresy of Christian nationalism. We are spiritually sick and urgently in need of critical care. The government policymakers have been wrestling with some huge economic questions. Questions like how best to enable people safely to return to work, how to respond to the massive unemployment, and last but not least, the not so hidden agenda, how to win the election in November. For millions of people, it's unlikely that there is work to which, either safely or unsafely, they can easily or quickly return. And this has raised the urgent question of rethinking instituting some version of universal basic income that was brought forth this year by presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who is labeled by some on the far right as a radical far left socialist. And yet, how many among us receive those $1,200 paychecks from our president? Those of us who make under $75,000 a year. And how quickly Congress passed the $600 a week unemployment benefit and also the payroll protection plan, all of which lifted our economy into a state of suspended animation, life support. Jesus spoke often about our relationship with money and economics, and today's parable is another example. And so I invite us this morning to hear today's parable through the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus, co-opted by empire. I'd like to share a contemporary recasting of it by Miguel de la Torre, professor of social ethics and Latino studies at Elif School of Theology in Denver, Colorado. He writes, early one morning, a certain factory vineyard owner sets out to hire additional laborers to build widgets in his plant. He drives his pickup truck to the local bodega, small Hispanic grocery store, where several laborers usually wait to be hired, negotiates a fair day's wage, and he sends them to his factory. Several hours later, mid-morning, he comes across some individuals standing around the parking lot of the Home Depot. So he employs them too and sends them to build widgets in the factory. At noon, he finds more unemployed laborers in the parking lot of a justice-based church that, as part of their ministry, provides facilities for day laborers waiting to be hired. Again, in the mid and late afternoon, he finds some more laborers who are unable to find employment that day. So the factory owner sends them to his plant. When the workday came to an end and it was time to pay the workers, the factory owner reversed the order and began to pay those who were hired last and worked only a few hours. He paid them the amount he originally agreed to pay those whom he first hired in the early morning. In fact, he paid everyone the same amount, a full day's wage. Some may have worked all day, some just a few hours, but everyone got the same amount of money. And when this parable is read with the paradigm of monetary fairness employed by capitalism, the story always presents a challenge. De la Torre points out that it tends to make people who benefit from the capitalist paradigm ask a version of the following question. Now, honestly, is this fair? Shouldn't workers be paid according to the amount of time they invested in the job? Doesn't time equal money? Is Jesus advocating an unfair wage structure? And as the Wall Street Journal recently pointed out, some people are making more money staying at home than working. It's a disincentive to work. And as indigenous people have asked for centuries about the vineyards and the plantations in this country, whose land was this in the first place? Now, as a child who learned my Christianity firmly within not only this capitalist system, but also within the system's own established church, and an aspiring white upper middle class family that was well off, relatively speaking, financially, thanks to the economic system, the parable of the laborers in the vineyard was often spiritualized and presented to us as a story about our souls being freely saved by God through faith and not works. It was a variation of what's called the Prosperity Bible, with an emphasis on charity and not justice, because who wants to change the system if it's working in your favor? As we were constantly reminded, the author of Ephesians said, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God." The gift of God in question was, of course, salvation. I wasn't really sure exactly what that meant. And we were repeatedly taught that it was available to all who had faith in a system of beliefs. And in doing this, our local priest and church school teachers performed what seemed to be a miracle, that of making the laboring aspect of the parable of the laborers in the vineyard seem to disappear from view. The work didn't matter, only their faith mattered. It didn't make sense to me then, and it doesn't make sense to me now. As De la Torre reminds us, for Hispanics and all other marginalized people of all kinds and colors, accustomed to standing at designated street corners throughout major cities of this country, and I would say the world as well, waiting and hoping for a patron to stop and offer a job, off the books, of course, to avoid employment taxes, the kind of fairness expressed in Jesus's parable is obviously present without any need to employ the justice-distorting, spiritualizing lens used by my own teachers. The truth is that any person or whole communities of people who daily find themselves in a situation where unemployment or minimum wage, contract service jobs are the norm, this parable offers a vision for a justice-based society. A society not based on neoliberal ethical principles, but on the mercies of God. Here is how De La Torre sums up this unspiritualized, practical, ethical reading of the parable, and I quote, he writes, "What Jesus teaches in the parable of the factory vineyard owner is that earning only half a denarius, that's a day's wage, meant that several family members would not eat that day. Only an uncaring or unmerciful heart would declare it just that these laborers leave without being able to meet their basic needs because through no fault of their own, they were unable to find a job." Reading the Bible from the margins, the lesson is that those who are economically privileged, like the factory owner, must remain responsible for those who are not. For those who live under an economic system that commodifies workers' time, justice is defined as set pay for a set number of hours worked. Yet Jesus here defines justice as ensuring that each worker obtains a living wage, regardless of the hours worked, so that all can share in the abundant life. It did not matter how many hours a laborer worked. What mattered was at the end of the day, she or he took home a living wage so that the entire family could survive for another day. The worker's responsibility was to labor, and it was the employer's responsibility to ensure that the employee was left with enough. What does it say about our present system, where if a person works full-time at the minimum hourly wage, he or she will earn several $1,000s below what the US government has determined to be the poverty level? What does it say about the rich who hoard their wealth while so many suffer poverty? The wealth of the top 3 men in this country is the same as the bottom 50%, and the richest 5% in this country hold 2/3 of the wealth of this country. Shocking. There really is enough if we share. And so this is why I encourage us as individuals and as a faith community to join the movement that our denomination, the UCC, is part of, the Real Living Wage Movement, the Poor People's Campaign, and the Just Peace Movement.
Am I on?
And as part of it, what happens in an age of mass employment like now? It seems that we're going to find out very soon, because the $600 a week benefit has ended. Flu season is about to descend upon us, and the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to result in millions of workers who, through no fault of their own, are suddenly unable to find employment for the day, the week, the month, the year. They will be in exactly the position the laborers spoken of in Jesus's parable, who were forced to get up before dawn to go to places where they might just, if they were lucky, pick up a job. But the point is that whether or not they get a job in the morning, in the middle of the day, or at the end of the day, they will still need a full day's wage to meet their basic needs of food, shelter, clothing. In his parable, Jesus shows us an employer who has understood the truth. And when we don't exclusively spiritualize it, it's a story that can help us begin to see a completely different idea of what our monetary economic justice system could be, rather than the dreadful, destructive one that has been offered to us within capitalism. It's a parable which shows us how it might be possible for all of us to find justice and abundance in this world rather than in some promised other future world. And our government now, which has historically consisted of the most extremely economically privileged, our government was forced to become the de facto employer of 1 in 5 workers, as many as 30 million. It is time to bring the wisdom of this parable to the awareness of our politicians, to transform our system and our budget, guided by the vision of the God of love, embodied in Jesus, a system that values all lives, not just white lives, that values people of all nations, not just US citizens, that values people of all religions, not just Christians, that values women as much as it values men, and not just able-bodied people, but people with disabilities, and that values life over maximizing short-term profits, that places priority not based on what is owed, but what is right and just. If the vineyard owners won't do it, then it's not God's vineyard, and it's up to the vineyard workers to unite together in love, to co-create God's economy, because there really is enough for all of us when we share, and each one of us has a part to play. So in closing, back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the day before her high school graduation, Ruth's beloved and deeply gifted mother died. At that time, Ruth was a twirler. She had no intention of doing something greater. Her mother's death changed all of that. Decades later, writing about her life on the Supreme Court, the small but mighty Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote, "I tell law students, if you're going to be a lawyer and just practice your profession, you have a skill, very much like a plumber. But if you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside of yourself that makes life a little better for the people less fortunate than you." May Ruth's death on the eve of this new year of Rosh Hashanah, the genesis of new life, inspire us to do our part as well, to unite together in our great and glorious diversity as people of love, to restore justice for all people. For there is no peace without justice for all. Amen. We will now hear the sermon response. Gabrielle.
Okay. So this is a familiar one, and I'm going to do it in Spanish, which I haven't done before. So translation's in the bulletin, so follow along if you want to. Okay. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arco iris que vernos lucir, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. De colores brillantes y finos se viste la aurora. De colores son los mil reflejos que el sol atesora. De colores se viste el diamante que vernos lucir, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. De colores, sí, de blanco y negro y rojo y azul y castaño. Son colores de gente que ríe y estrecha la mano. Son colores de gente que sabe de la libertad, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí.
Muchísimas gracias. Now it is time for us to bring our prayers of need and gratitude. Please type your prayers in the chat. And private prayers, you can submit those in the welcome form in the order of worship printed in your bulletins. Oh God, you know our deepest thoughts and needs. Before I form each word, you already know. God who gathers us, who speaks to us through one another in all the in-between places, open our hearts to the cries of all people and all creation. God of healing, we pray for all of those dying of COVID and other illnesses, not only in this country, but throughout the world, with 30 million infections, especially the countries that are most vulnerable now. Comfort all those who are separated from loved ones, and deliver us from politicians who censor science and value their own re-election more than human life. God of shelter, protect all those fleeing from human-induced climate change-related events, wildfires in the Pacific Northwest, hurricanes on the East Coast, and climate change-related events that are happening globally. Awaken us to the truth of science. Deliver us from the deadly bondage of unregulated greed and profiteering that is contributing to global warming, that is harming and destroying the lives of the poorest people of color. God, protect physicians and nurses and firefighters and teachers and parents. Protect all those struggling to find work, or pay rent, buy food, pay for medical care. Help us to end voter suppression. God of children, inspire us in these days of distance learning and social isolation and family stress. Are there other prayers? I'll check the chat.
At least on my end, the chat is not working. I don't know if other people are having. Yes, okay, I see nods. Are other people having that problem?
I just turned on
Okay.
Oh, you just turned it on.
public and
Okay.
private chat.
Okay.
Sorry.
If you have prayers,
I have
please
a prayer.
Okay, Cheryl, go ahead.
I have a prayer of gratitude. I am thankful for my salvation through Jesus Christ. Jesus died for us. He is my Lord and Savior. And the sin that I have in my life, I can't totally get away from it. And I know I can't get away from it. So I am thankful that he forgives us and gives us the opportunity to turn around and walk back in the direction toward him and toward the life that he lived and the example that he wants us to follow.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Repent is all about change and consciousness.
Can anyone hear me?
Forgiveness. Yes.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
It took me a half hour to get on using Vivian's computer.
You have a prayer, Rod?
I don't have a prayer. I simply have a comment. You know, when you think things can't get any worse, they sure as hell get worse, you know, with the passing of Ginsburg.
Mm.
And now with the Senate in control of the Republicans, of course, and they're talking about defectors, but that's a pipe dream. You know, there aren't going to be any defectors. This means we're going to have 6 right-wing judges on the Supreme Court, and the House can't do a damn thing about it. And even if Trump loses and Biden wins, and the Democrats manage to gain control of the Senate again, it's still not going to change because, you know, these judicial judgments extend into the, as they say in the Bible, the 3rd and 4th generations. And so we're going to be stuck with.
And my prayer is for those of us who are in a place of despair, that we tap into that same spirit that inspired the tiny but powerful Ruth Bader Ginsburg to persevere through cancer, through discrimination, through discouragement, and to continue to work and dedicate her life and to do everything that she could for justice. And may each one of us do our part, despite how overwhelming it might seem. Catherine saying, prayers for senators in fairness, wait until after the election to nominate a justice. Sheila, I'm so grateful for excellent health care I have received, for kindness of dear friends. It helps to bring me back to normal. Nancy, prayers for all of us to keep hope, even in these times that are so grim, seem to be getting grimmer. Prayers that we will know that God is in our midst. Other prayers? Prayers of gratitude for every breath that we take, that we may not take anything for granted. The clear blue skies, our miraculous bodies, our beloved ones, our capacity to grow and to change and to forgive and to learn, and for this day and this time together. And we continue to lift up prayers for loved ones, friends, family who are sick, who are isolated, who are lonely, who have lost their jobs, that we may manifest that love. Others, I hope, Katie, I hope if we all vote and continue to be active and change, I have hope if we all vote and continue to be active in changing our society. I do as well. Amen. There's Vivian. And so in response, let us join together in the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Creator, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
Put in the password.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And so before the closing song, the song of giving and closing, a number of you have been asking about relief efforts for fire victims. Several Sundays from now, we will be receiving the Neighbors in Need offering, which includes support for climate disaster victims. There's information in the weekly emails and in the bulletins, October 5th, World Communion Sunday. And we will now hear our song of giving and closing. Gabrielle.
So, kind of just in the last few minutes, I decided to do some evening songs since today's all about work. And
Yeah.
in a truly good situation, we also get to rest. So, you know, let's do that. Sorry, mic adjustment. Fields the shadows
Amen. So that really felt like the benediction to me. Thank you so much for that beautiful closing, Gabrielle. Before another blessing, I want to encourage you to stay on and join us for a conversation. It's a continuation of the Brian McLaren Great Spiritual Migration, 15 minutes after the service ends. And this week, Catherine Kessler and Jeremy and Susan Junfish are going to be focusing on chapter 8, which is a discussion about science and human motivations related to climate denial. Really looking forward to this conversation. And so hear these words of blessing. May Christ's example inspire you. May God's Spirit empower you. And may God's blessing surround you. Rest gently upon you and protect you from the world's thorns of racism and the thistles of injustice. Amen. Becky, you need to unmute Gabrielle.
My bad. I was just playing.
Okay, all right. Okay.